Well, continuing on from my last piece of the lecture right here, you'll notice that I said, well, we answered the question, the pie chart and bar charts are only used for qualitative data. Why would it be inappropriate to attempt to use this with the other kinds of data for quantitative data, such as movie links? Well, I showed you why, right? Look at this, movie links, right? I got the count of movie links, and that's useless. That tells me nothing, right? So what we need to do is we need to do something else. So what we're going to do is we're going to use quantitative data histograms. A histogram tells you what it is, right? And you see what a histogram is meant to represent. When data is arranged in bins, or sometimes we call them classes right here, right? Then we can look at that data and tell us something about the distribution. That is the way the values are spread out over all of the possible values. And visually, we can see that in a histogram that we can do that, right? Now, a histogram is basically a bar graph. The only difference is that the bars touch. And the reason they touch is there's no gaps between the categories. And so we want to make sure that we understand how that works. So let's do a histogram in Excel from our pivot chart tool, okay? So I'm going to go and I'm going to open up another data set. This time I'm going to open up the data set body temp. And this column, this is the numerical data that we want to do. Now, we can use a data analysis tool in Excel, but let's do this first. All right. So I go to Canvas and I open up under course modules right here. I scroll all the way down to the bottom and I find body temp. There it is, body temp, right? I would open that up. I've done that already, and look at it. Here's the data set right here. Now, you'll notice one problem right here. There's no title. So I'm going to create a new sheet. I'm going to write temp, and then I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to copy my data. So let's make sure that we copy this data over. There's a lot of data points this time. So we copy it, copy, boom, there it is. And we go to sheet 2, and making sure our cursor is right under where it says temp, we go ahead and paste. There we go. There's our data. Nice. Okay. So let me show you how we create a histogram. So taking my title and my data and just highlighting all of that all the way down. I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to go to Pivot Table. And again, let's let Excel do that thing that it does. It creates a brand new sheet, right? So here we go, temperature. And it just gives you a total of those temperatures, it's just adding them up. Now that's kind of meaningless to us. We don't care what the sum of the temperatures are, so we're going to have to change that. But I am going to give you rows right here, right? And you'll see that it's adding up all of the rows. So we're going to change that where it says sum values. We want to change that to count. So change value field settings, we change that to count. And we're going to show this as percentage of grand total. Boom. All right, again, that's useless, right? Because if we were to try to use a bar chart or something like that, right, that's useless. That's not going to help us. We want to create a pivot chart. So the way we're going to do this is that we're going to do one more step. So up at the top, we're going to go to where it says Pivot Table Tools and hit Analyze. We're going to go to Selection, and this is going to give us a way to create classes. Now our classes, our lowest is 96.5 and our highest is 99.6. Let's change that. Let's make that go from 96 to 100 and go by 1 degree temperatures. Well, there we go, right? That's a few more cells. Now you'll notice that's not a lot of cells right here, right? If you looked at some examples of the histogram in the textbook, right, that's not a whole lot of information. We can change that group selection. Let's say that we group it by 0.5 instead. Look, that spreads out the data and gives it a little bit more detail, right? So our categories are going by 0.5 degree increments. And now what we can do is we can insert a pivot chart, and this is the one we want to go for, bar chart. Well, it says a column chart, right? Clustered column, that's the one we're going to use. And for design, let's make it into a histogram. So our histogram, well, if we go to quick layouts, we go down here, we see one that says histogram. Let's put that in there. And for format, one thing that I would like to do is I would like to, if I click on these bars, I want to put an outline that's different from the color I'm using. So let's use the color black right there, and there we go. Right now all the bars are visible. Okay, and this is my histogram, right? And this is body temperature. Measurements. Body temperature frequency, let's say relative frequency. There we go. Right, so this tells me how frequently certain body temperatures occur, right? And we see that the highest bar is right here at 98.5. This distribution might be considered skewed to the left a little bit, right? It's not a normal or symmetric distribution. That's kind of useful information to us, as you'll read in this section. All right, but now let's just go back here to the question, right? And let's take this information that we've just learned. What could we say? Well, we might ask the question, where is the center of the data in this distribution? What happens at the high and low ends? Well, let's go back right here, right? The center, or the highest point, is from 98.5 to 99. That's interesting, right? We've got a lot of readings from there. And only a few readings from 98 to 98.5, right? And, you know, that area right there, 98.5, seems to be typically, but it looks like a lot of people are running kind of low in this one. All right, well, interesting information anyways, right? What it tells us about the high and low ends, right? So what could we do? Well, one of the kind of things that we like to do in addition to coming up with a histogram is finding quartiles, percentiles, mean, medians, and mode. Well, let me talk about those. Excel has a whole bunch of commands that help us. There's commands here for quartiles, right? Quartiles denote divide up the data into 25% chunks, right? So there's the bottom 25% that makes up quartile 1, and the bottom 50%, which makes up quartile 2, and then the bottom 75%, right, quartile 1 to quartile 3, that makes up the bottom 75%, and so on. So a quartile, right, here's our command. We're going to select quartile, and then we're going to put our data array and quartile range in there. There's also a percentile, which is similar, only that gives us a more specific way of choosing a percentage of data we want lower. So if we wanted to find somehow the data that was in the bottom 90% or bottom 10%, right? We could figure that out. Also, we have our averages, the ones that we are used to, right? The average, which is actually the arithmetic mean of the data. There's the median of the data, which is found by using median equals median, then our data range. And then there's mode, which is the most frequently occurring. Right? And it's better than actual work with Excel. There's also some commands here for standard deviation, variance, and range. Right? And I'll share all of this with you guys as a reference sheet. But on standard Excel, if we have a sample data, we use stdev, that's standard deviation, .s. That stands for sample. There's another command just like it for populations if we have the entire population. The variance is just the square of our standard deviation. It does tell us some interesting information, and you'll find later on that you might want that information. And then the range, which is the maximum value minus the minimum value. Well, we don't have a range command in Excel, so we have to make do with finding a maximum, finding a minimum, and then finding the difference between those two. So let's go back to our body temperature, and let's locate these bin, max, and quartiles, our percentiles for 15 and 90, mean, median, mode, and standard deviation, variance, and range. So let's go back to our data set and check this out here. So here is my data set for my body temperature, right? So we said we wanted to find our quartiles, right? So let's do that. We're going to find our minimum, our quartile 1, quartile 2, our quartile 3, and our maximum. All right, so our data set runs from A1 all the way down to A106. Right, so let's go ahead and type this in. I'll show you how it works. For the command minimum, we're going to type in equals min, right? And you'll see that the data, the function comes up on the screen. So if I double click on that, one way of entering in the data right here, my data range, is to type in the numbers A1 followed by a colon, that's a dot over a dot, and A106, which is the last data point. And then if I close my parentheses and hit enter, that gives me the lowest value. Now another way to select a data range, and I'll do this for the maximum because that's the easiest command in this group, equals MAX, X, right? You see max A right here, guys, max. All right, and we can just click and drag. So I can put my mouse on top of cell A1, hold down my left mouse button, and then drag that mouse cursor down until I get to the very bottom of the data set. And then I'm going to close that piece of data, and there's the largest, right? Okay. Quartiles are a little bit harder, but this command goes like this, equals quartile. And you'll see that there's a few commands right here. We're actually going to go to one, the quartile.inc means that we're including percentile values from 0 all the way to 1 inclusive, so that means everything. That's the one that you want. And our data set, I'll just go ahead and type that one in right here. We put in the data range, that's array, and then what quartile do we want? Well, we want the first quartile here, so we select that. There it is. That's the first quartile of our data. Quartile 2, well, equals quartile. Right, here we go. Inc again. Our array A1 to A106. And we want quartile 2 this time. Double click on that. Or you can enter in the number 2 if you want. But it's always a comma and then select that. Quartile 3. A1 to A106 in this case, comma, and we want quartile 3, so we click in 3 there. There it is. These are our quartiles right here. Okay, so what about this other information? Well, let's see. Percentile, right? Let me show you how to enter in a percentile. So we want the 10th percentile. All right, well, to get the 10th percentile, what I'm going to do is this. The command in Excel is percentile. Just like in our quartile, we want ENC, right? So we put in our data array. We're going from cell A1 colon to A106, comma. K is the decimal value of our percentage. So we want 0.1 to represent our 10%. And if we hit that, there it is. 97.3 is a data value. That means that there's 10% of the data less than that. How about our 90th percentile? Well, in this case, same thing. Percentile. We want the one that goes INC. We want our data array A1 to A106. And we want 0.9 to represent our 90th percentile. So 98.8 makes up that one. All right, we wanted mean, median, and mode. Well, the mean, median, mode, these are pretty easy ones to use. I'll show you. For the mean, you enter the command average, average. Just use that, average. And we select our data set. We close the parentheses and hit enter. Boom, there it is. 98.2 is the mean at the median, right? The command is equals median. Again, our data cells from A1 to A106. There it is, 98.4. And our mode, we type in mode. We only want one mode, right? So we're going to see if there's a single value that makes up the highest percentage of all these values. And so for mode, if we select that, 98.6. So it looks like the most frequently occurring is 98.6. Oh, I guess that's normal temperature. All right. How about these other ones? We wanted standard deviation. Let's find the standard deviation. The standard deviation is interesting. What the standard deviation is it tells us how far does the data deviate on average from the mean. So 98.2, we want to compare all the data to 98.2 and say, well, on average, how far does the data deviate from that? So we're going to enter in the command equals stdev, and you'll see that a couple commands come up here. We want the one that says .s. So we're going from A1 to A106, and our standard deviation is 0.6229 rounded data points, right? By the way, our range, let's get our range, and I'll show you how that one works. The range is found by taking the difference of the maximum minus the minimum. So that's actually really easy. I'll show you what I would do. Equals, I've calculated my maximum up here. I can enter in minus, and then minimum, just select that cell right there, and 3.1 is my data range. Sort of interesting. Okay, so that's pretty cool. We can certainly do that. Now, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an assignment at home to try for yourselves. So this time you're going to open up the data labeled Oscar, and there's two columns there, one for actress ages and one for actor ages. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a pivot table in which you create a histogram, right? So that you're going to arrange your data by starting at 20 and ending at 80 for both actors and actresses, and you're going to give a by value of 10. I want you to find the mean, median, and mode of the actress ages and the standard deviation and range of the actress ages, and the same thing for the actors. After you do all of that, I'm going to ask you a question. How do the two distributions compare? Was there what is the center of data for actresses and actors? Is there any evidence here to support the charge that Hollywood favors younger actresses as compared to older male actors? Why or why not? Okay. So to wrap up, don't forget to fill out the Google feedback form by Friday to be counted present for this week. Also, don't forget the following are due on Monday: the Chapter 2 WebAssign homework and the Canvas quiz number 1. Don't forget that the lecture is my online Google form, and you gotta be completing that in order to get a participation grade and attendance. The seminar is on Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. It's optional, but highly encouraged, and I hope to see you there. Have a great week, everybody.